Jack, born Jennifer, also known as Subject Zero, was a young human female born in 2161. It is unclear where she was born, but she was on Eden Prime, a human colony, when the Cerberus organization abducted her. Jack was perhaps the most powerful human biotic in the galaxy due to her exposure to the element Zero in the womb. She would become the focus of Cerberus experiments on Prega Teltin's facility. Though she was tortured physically and mentally, most of Cerberus's grueling experiments would prove effective, and she became all the more deadly. In her adolescence, the other children rioted against her oppressors, and she was freed, killing everyone in her path, staff and children alike. She would go on to become a space pirate, join a cult, sold as a slave, and ran with many gangs. However, she never stayed in one place for too long, always being cut off or leaving on her own. Eventually, her free reign would come to an end when the Blue Suns faction imprisoned her on Purgatory. She would not be freed until Commander Shepard, under order of the Elusive Man, offered her a spot on his team for a suicide mission. Reluctantly, she obliged, and she would become one of the most naturally powerful members of his team. Liara Tassoni was a young Asari born on her homeworld of Thessia in 2077. She was an Asari researcher specializing in Prothean technology, wanting to escape the pressures of being the daughter of the great matriarch, Benezia. She would meet Commander Shepard after her mother was identified as an enemy to the Citadel. Together, she and Shepard would uncover the mysteries behind the Protheans, and she would temporarily subvert the plans of Saren and the invading Reapers. After the apparent death of Commander Shepard, Liara would leave her studies of the Prothean technology in favor for a career as an information broker on Ilium. Her time as a broker would tear down the walls of her otherwise shy and reserved demeanor. Her newfound determination would eventually earn her the title of Shadow Broker, effectively controlling a majority of the information in the galaxy, always sold to the highest bidder. Liara attempted to use her status to destroy the Reapers, but came up short. Still, she was an extremely competent Asari biotic and was extremely intelligent in her dealings. As with all my Versus videos, I will be comparing these opponents in their primes. For Jack, this will be her time during Mass Effect 3, when she remained powerful but kept a more cool head. For Liara, this would be during her time as she took the mantle of the Shadow Broker. Jack stood around 1.5 meters tall, standard for a human female. As a human, her physiology was on par with the Tyrian race, who were strong, fast, and agile. However, humans were less agile than Asari, though they had more strength in them. And humans are stronger than Solarians, but much slower. Most of all, humans were able to achieve a talent for biotics, usually through the exposure of element Zero in the womb. Much like Jack, humans were often the centerpiece to many biological experiments because of their diverse and robust physiology. Jack would showcase high levels of physical endurance and resiliency. After her time in the Cerberus biotic facility, her body would be hardened during her tenure as a slave. She also ran with many gangs and pirates during her escapades across the galaxy, which would strengthen her resolve as well. However, she was not completely dominant in her strength. During her time in the prison facility Purgatory, she was overpowered by several inmates who took advantage of her. Though later, she would exact her revenge, killing every single one of her violators. Jack was an astounding character of physical prowess. Not many could overpower her one-to-one. Only a group or a whole prison facility could keep her tame. Liara Tassoni was under 2 meters tall, standard for the Asari race. Though Liara herself never claims to be a female, the official codex in the Mass Effect games state that they are an all-female, one-gender race that go through 3 stages of life. First, Asari of 350 years and younger are identified as maidens, marked by their curiosity and adventure. Liara would be marked as a maiden as she was only a century old and had a fascination with ancient Prothean technology. Other maidens would often become dancers as well, as Asari were very flexible. After maidenhood, Asari grew to matrons, who were marked by their desire to settle and raise children. This was very interesting, as Asari were one-gender species. What's interesting is that they can mate not only with other Asari, but any other species with a nervous system. However, the DNA was taken entirely from Asari biology and none from her partner. This was so because an Asari joined their nervous system with another to reproduce. Their abilities with the nervous system would also extend to their advanced use of biotics as well, which will become useful later. Finally, Asari would become matriarchs, fulfilling the role of a counselor. Unfortunately, we do not see too much of Liara's physical abilities, but we could assume they were of the standard of an Asari. Therefore, she was probably very flexible and agile, especially since she was of maiden age. Though Liara was spry and springy, Jack would be too much for her. Liara's only play against Jack would be to evade and attack from a distance, but the second Jack gets up close, she was done. Jack wasn't a complete slouch in her speed or agility either. Liara could evade for a time, but eventually Jack would be able to catch up and lay hands on Liara. Thus, I give the edge to Jack in regards to her physical abilities. Jack had no specific classification as a soldier or tech, as she was more a ragtag pirate. However, this could mean she had a lot of versatility within her combat experiences, though it could also mean she lacked experience in training as a combatant. However, she is probably most similar to the Vanguard class, identified by their high-risk, high-reward combat style. They were great close range, but it would also open them up to attack as well. In battle, Jack often took the forefront of the group, using her biotic barrier to protect herself and heavy weapons to blow her enemies back. Where she lacked was her defense against physical attacks from imposing foes. For example, in the comic Mass Effect Foundation, Jack is knocked unconscious by a Krogan. Granted, this was a Krogan. Jack's preferred weapon by far was her shotgun, which lacked in range but carried a big punch up close. Her use of the shotgun would enable her to get close to her foes where she felt most comfortable. However, she did carry a pistol as a sidearm as well, favoring the heavy pistol in particular. Heavy pistols were effective at medium to long range, but Jack would not often use them as it was not her MO to be at the back of the party. Liara Tassoni was defined as an Asari scientist, which held strong attributes for constitution and biotic region. Her extensive knowledge of other species would probably give her an edge to kill them effectively as well. Liara usually hung towards the back of the squads she was a part of, utilizing her biotics tactically. When she first met Shepard, she did not have as much combat experience, but would gain some during her fight with the Geth. However, in her pursuit for the Shadow Broker title, she would again take a backseat to many combat situations, working from a hover chair instead. Though of course, in her direct overthrow of the previous Shadow Broker, she does manage to take the position by force, whether that be with Shepard or with her own hired guns. Liara's preferred weapons were interchangeable between heavy pistols and submachine guns. She likely used her pistol at range in conjunction with her biotics. The heavy pistol had a low fire rate but high accuracy. It was very similar to a sniper rifle with less damage impact. Her submachine gun balanced her arsenal, great at close to mid-range. Submachine guns had a high rate of fire but were far less accurate. Liara probably only used this gun in a crunch. Again, though Liara was capable in combat, all Jack knew was combat. She was bred for combat and tortured to become a killing machine. Yes, Liara's scientific mind probably afforded her an edge in how to decisively kill a human, but her mind was not designed on how to do it. She did get some combative experience in her time with Shepard and her takeover of the Shadow Broker, but that experience would pale in comparison to Jack's, who lived a life of combat. The only way Liara would be able to get an upper hand on Jack is if she was successful in keeping her distance from her. But still, I think Jack was capable of getting her biotic hands on Liara. Therefore, I give the edge to Jack in regards to her combative abilities. Jack had many abilities at her use, but one was her absolute favorite: biotics. Of her biotic powers, she specialized with shockwave, pull, and warp. Shockwave was a very powerful biotic power that could throw unshielded enemies into the air. If an enemy does happen to have shields, the ability would merely stun the foe for a moment. Pull was a standard biotic power, which allowed its users to hurl their enemies into the air. Unlike Shockwave, which had a similar outcome, Pull did not do too much damage and was more strategic than destructive. When a biotic like Jack applied Pull, it lowered the mass of the targeted being, lifting them into the air effortlessly. Usually a squad would take that opportunity to throw or blast the enemy out of the air. Jack also utilized Warp, another biotic ability that enabled her to hinder enemies' regeneration. Not to mention, she could also deal double damage to armor and biotic barriers. In terms of her weapons, she only utilized one special booster, warp ammo. Much like the biotic power warp, warp ammo also dampens one's biotic barriers and armor. What's more, one who is already affected by a biotic ability, such as shockwave or pull, would be dealt double damage. Thus, Jack had a deadly combination in regards to her special abilities. She could open with the use of shockwave or pull. Once her enemy was open, she could combine with a barrage of warp biotics and finish them off with her shotgun full of warp infused ammo. Liara Tassoni was a biotics expert, which was customary to Asari, as they were naturally talented with the ability. Liara's core abilities would include Stasis, Warp, and Singularity. Stasis was an extremely defensive power, immobilizing the enemy, yet dealt no damage. This could be used when Liara was on her back foot or facing many enemies. However, the huge downside of the power was that while the enemy was under stasis effect, no damage could penetrate its wall. What's more, enemies could build immunity to it the more it was used against them. Her second ability was the powerful Warp, which, like Jack, enabled her to reduce armor and biotic barriers on her enemies. And finally, she held the powerful ability of Singularity, which created something like a small black hole, sucking her opponents into it. Anyone caught in her biotic field would be affected greatly. Though the ability did not do direct damage, it did progressively drain the use of shields, barriers, and armor for a few moments. This would open up Liara's enemies to weapons, which were also equipped with warp ammo. Again, not only did warp ammo deal damage, as all ammo does, but it also reduced biotic barriers and armor. Her ammo, coupled with her abilities with biotics, would open enemies to a world of hurt. But the question is this: could she deal enough damage when her enemies were there for the taking? This category comes much closer. Yes, Jack was one of the top human biotics in the universe, perhaps only behind Gillian Grayson and perhaps Commander Shepard. What's more, While Jack had an astounding power with her biotics, she generally lacked control. By the time of Mass Effect 3, she certainly had a more mellow head, but she was still a rager. However, Liara was an Asari who had inherent biotic skill. Just as Jack was born for combat, Liara was born for biotics. Yet, it is not Liara's inherent talent with biotics that gives her any decisive edge. Instead, we must look at their tools. Jack has some powerful abilities to choose from, including the devastating shockwave. Liara had powerful attributes as well, including her heart-stopping stasis. And it was this ability that made me think Liara would have a slight advantage. As stated before, Liara would have to play the distance game with Jack, never letting her get too close. If Jack ever did get too close, I believe she would hit her with stasis, disabling movement until Liara could get away. At a distance, Liara could whittle Jack down with her warp ammo and her singularity. At a distance, Liara could whittle down Jack with her warp ammo and her singularity, as Jack was a vicious fighter, incapable of quitting. What's more, Liara's abilities were more used in a squad and more defensive, while Jack's were very offensive. Still, I have to give the extremely slight edge to Liara in regards to her special abilities. A fight between Jack, aka Subject Zero, and Liara Tassoni, aka the Shadow Broker, would be a showcase of biotic prowess. Though Liara was agile and spry, Jack's agility and strength in a close-up fight would give her the edge. And though Liara had gained combat experience with Commander Shepard, Jack lived combat her entire life. However, even though Jack is possibly one of the best, if not the best human biotic, Liara's specialty with biotics as an Asari, especially her focus on stasis and singularity, may give her a leg up against Jack. Thus, the Asari was not entirely outclassed. Let's set up this fight. Let's say it takes place on the Citadel, in a courtyard with park benches and an open area. Both fighters have some distance away from each other, let's say 20 or so yards. Liara Tassoni catches sight of Jack across the courtyard, who is already prepping her shotgun. The Asari ducks behind a tree or bench, assessing her situation. Her knowledge as a shadow broker would help her figure out Jack's strategy in the fight. With this thought in mind, she begins pulling benches and planters between her and Jack. Just as she begins to use her biotics to pull the nearest bench, Jack is already revving up a shockwave. Just in time, Liara pulls a single bench between the powerful shockwave and herself, dampening the effect the ability has on her, though it still manages to hit her. Without remorse or pause, Jack bull rushes Liara. 40 paces away, 30 paces, 20. Liara lifts her submachine gun, unloading in Jack's direction. Jack throws up a biotic barrier, protecting herself from the onslaught of warp ammo. She does not slow her run, letting her last lunge lead into a long jump. At the apex of her arc, she revs up another shockwave, but is suddenly stopped in her tracks. With an outstretched hand, Liara holds her steady with stasis, but she knows she won't be able to last long. Still holding Jack in place, Liara finds better cover, aiming down at Jack with her pistol. Jack falls out of stasis into a tumble on the ground. With a deft movement, she rolls towards Liara, throwing up another biotic barrier, protecting herself from Liara's heavy pistol projectiles. But Jack is in trouble. The warp ammo Liara uses starts to penetrate her barrier. In a fit of rage, Jack musters up a biotic shockwave strong enough to send Liara tumbling over heel. Attacking with more intellect, Jack dashes towards Liara, firing her pistol at the same time. Liara throws up a barrier of her own, but she too weakens at Jack's use of warp ammo. In a desperate attempt, Liara throws singularity at Jack, sucking her into an energy field, completely draining her of her armor and barriers. Liara lifts her submachine gun towards Jack and fires. Without thinking, Jack pulls a bench between she and Liara, protecting herself from the deadly fire. Free from the effects of singularity, Jack drops back down, continuing her pace towards Liara. Only this time, she succeeds. Jack hits Liara with warp, bringing down her barriers. Without stopping, Jack hits her with a pull, lifting Liara in the air. And with another burst of rage, Jack pushes her back into a tree with her biotics, lifting her shotgun into her hands. And then, Jack pulls the trigger. And thus, I deem Jack, aka Subject Zero, the victor. Of course, this is all my opinion. Please leave your thoughts and comments below. Discussion is always my favorite part. Peace, love, and this is my favorite YouTube channel on the Citadel.
Is the dark side stronger?